Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Turndog Talks 2. I'm delighted to be joined by Tom Greveson, who is part of Revolution Viewing. He's the guy behind it all and the CEO and the person who came up with the idea all them years ago. And Tom's very kindly welcoming me into his home. It's been a bit of a chaotic day, but we've managed to get the recording sorted. And we're going to talk about his mistakes, but then how he overcame them. And it's all for the successful mistake, the book that I'm working on. So Tom, thank you very much for agreeing to speak to me today.
You're absolutely welcome, Matt.
Okay, well, to start with, please tell us a little bit about yourself, what it is that you do and what you do at Revolution Viewing.
Sure. I set up Revolution Viewing back in 2004 after I finished uni. So I graduated as an event management graduate. I decided I wanted to set up my own business, and I thought that creating 360 virtual tours was a reasonable way forward. So I borrowed some equipment from the university and I started to play around with it and create my first 360 virtual tours, and within about a year I started earning a little bit of money. I took on a couple of other guys, Tony and Jimmy, who are still directors of the company and shareholders, and then over time we took on a few more people, and so now in 2013 there's 18 of us, and I'm sort of growing at a decent rate really. So we create virtual tours, the kind of 360 Google things you might have seen. We do that for universities and property developers predominantly, and a few sort of blue chips here and there.
Yeah, and I first met Tom at a talk I went to at my old business school, and I remember seeing his bio in the sort of pamphlet beforehand, and I checked out the website, and I was just wowed by the sort of 3D aspect of the iPhone, because you can, as you twist your phone, it's kind of like playing a game, and I was like, ooh, this is good. So
we make the most of all the latest Apple technology. It's quite handy actually, because we've got the 360 virtual tours, and we use the gyroscope, I think it is, within the within the phone, so when you move it around it's like you're in the scene. So
it's perfect for someone like me who's easily entertained with things that I knew and entertained. I'm like, oh, I want it. So
that's nice of you to say. Cheers.
Well, absolutely not a problem. And yeah, I'm sure that with a product like this and the kind of people you're always trying to connect with, property developers, I always hear they can be, not always the easiest people to work with, and working with educational... Oh, absolutely no, you wouldn't. And working with educational organisations, again, there can be a lot of bureaucracy around it. So I'm sure there's been plenty of issues and mistakes made along the way, both from the technology side and working with people. So I'm intrigued to hear some of the issues that you've come across over the years, and please tell us a tale about one of the mistakes, but then how you turned it around to get to where you are today.
Okay, so picture me starting the business in 2004, scrapping around trying to make some money, trying to do 360 virtual tours, but struggling to really find the marketplace. So I'm speaking to a variety of different people, sometimes the right people potentially, but often the wrong people, so I'm sort of wasting a lot of time. And I'm getting a bit frustrated, I'm getting a bit concerned that I might not be able to make a go of it, and I do a couple of 360 virtual tours, and then someone says, can I also do a website? And I think, well, I sort of know a little bit about that stuff, and I can probably find new guys who do websites, so I'll manage that. So yeah, we'll do a website. Someone says, can you do a bit of branding? I say, oh, yeah, I sort of understand the basics of branding, so yeah, okay, we'll do a bit of that. And these aren't big organisations with huge budgets, as you'd imagine. I'm sort of the first and second year in the business, so these are small businesses that are, that are trying, just like I was trying to make my own way, and they were trying to make their own way. They didn't have big budgets, so essentially I'm sort of selling myself for a very small rate per hour, and I'm not really focusing on building the mainstay of the business or the core product. I'm just doing a little bit of this, a little bit of that, anything that comes my way. And I don't think I'd be alone with that. I think there's a hell of a lot of people out there who have done that and maybe still doing that, and I think one of the big turning points for my business, so that was the mistake I was making. So just to clarify, the mistake I was making was trying to do a bit of everything.
Trying to be what's
a jack of all and a master of absolutely nothing.
Yeah, that's right.
Absolutely, and even I was just trying hard. Lots of enthusiasm, lots of time. Probably in hindsight, maybe a little bit of wasted time. Although I'd like to think that all those times I was trying hard to make something work, I was dealing with people, I was maybe making the wrong choices, but still trying hard to make something work for someone. I was definitely learning. I learned a hell of a lot, and I worked with some great people, don't get me wrong, but at the same time, I wasn't really building anything. If I'd have carried on like that, I would still be one guy trying very hard to do a little bit of everything, but mastering nothing, working with a lot of local businesses, but not with really a single sector. And I think that's where, I can't say that that's a mistake, because if your goal in business, and I'm a strong believer that, you know, if you want to be the person that runs his or her own business, and that's what you want to do, and you don't want to have to ever employ people because you don't like the idea of that, and you're quite happy doing a little bit of everything, working with some great local people, with local businesses, there's nothing wrong with that. So if that's your goal, I think that's important for me to state. My goal wasn't that. My goal was to run a business where I could develop something that I could be massively proud of on a reasonable scale and employ people. So I really enjoyed employing people, managing people, working with talented people, and having specialists within our organisation now who are the best in the country at what we do. So I've got a guy who's called Dan, and he is so talented when it comes to programming, coding, virtual open days for university. Okay. He's genuinely the best at it in the UK when it comes to our very niche product. Now it's, you know, we do something that's really sort of specific and niche, so there's, you know, I would sort of hold my hands up and say, right, you know, we are doing something so niche, so it's maybe not, it's not as big a feat as becoming the best web designers in the UK, because however you'd measure that, that'd be a huge feat, because there's some huge competition there. I'd say with what we do, because it's very niche, there is some serious competition, some really good players out there, but we've managed to become the best at what we do in the market, and we're leading that market.
That's what it's all about. You want to ultimately become the best at what you do, and sometimes the ones who are so niche, where they just have a very specific market, they are sometimes the most lucrative, because the people who need them are always going to need them, and you build a strong relationship, and you can sometimes make a lot more money by just targeting very few rather than trying to appeal to a broader audience.
I think that's a really good way of putting across sort of the message I'm trying to get across, is that the big turning point for my business was when we started to get a bit of traction with the 360 tours with a couple of property developers. We realised that was, and there was a business mentor of mine, a guy called Steve Baker, who's funnily enough now my accountant. He didn't start life as an accountant, but he's ran and sold businesses himself. He's a top guy, and he just said, Tom, with a business like yours and with, you know, the position that you are at the moment, just find one market that's worth £100,000 per annum, where you can make maybe 15% profit. Start there, find that. Now I know that would be too small for other people or other companies, but for me at that time, back in probably 2006, that was just the right kind of advice to be given. And I was scratching my head, I was thinking, what's this? You know, so I'm still making the mistake of trying to do a bit of everything. I'm scratching my head thinking, well, what is this one market? So we're trying to focus on virtual tours. What's the one market where 360 virtual tours could be worth 100,000 quid? I was scratching my head. And at that time, we were working for a single property developer, and we were doing 35,000 a year with that single property developer. And so embarrassingly, it took me a fair few months to put two and two together and think, well, if we've got one client in that sector, property development, exactly, in theory. As it happens, that property developer who is still sort of one of our biggest clients, and we've got a great relationship with those guys, and we struggle to find many others that are sort of as visionary as that company in terms of the use of our kind of products. But finally I found a market that worked with the niche product that I had, and then we could push it and push it and push it. And when you're been doing something for a number of years and you feel like you've got the traction, you start to get a sort of the odd moment of clarity. And so for me, the moments of clarity were when I realised that I'm trying to get our marketing guys now to sort out templates so that when we approach new property developers, we've got some really great examples and well-worded emails, for example, that we send out to those guys. And we can do it because we're not trying to target the whole world. We know with whom our product works really well. We understand that market. We like working with those guys. We know it's profitable. And when we start to set up marketing material for that, we can really focus on making sure that marketing material is correct. So imagine if we suddenly had 20 different markets and we're trying to do marketing campaigns for 20 different sectors. That means there's 20 email templates that all have to have specific examples and wording that works for that industry. That's really testing, and there are organisations out there that are huge, I'm sure, that do cater for a variety of markets or a much wider market. But I think for us, It was just necessary to, I think as soon as we've stepped outside of the property developer or the university market, we found it's really difficult to make a decent enough profit to be able to employ the number of people we employ and then continue to grow. As soon as we step outside of those two sectors, quite often, or nearly every time, it just becomes a little bit too slow. And it's all right just doing one little niche job for one client outside of that sector, but unless that job itself pays a huge amount that will allow to pay for the R&D for that job and with a huge profit margin, then I always say to the guys, to what end? So, all right, so where are we going?
Diversification is always a fantastic thing, but it needs to have that end game and it needs to make sense. And if it's only going to kind of open up a very small market, you might as well leave it to one side. I know several web design companies seem to be, the biggest players in this, where they go into it, they're very good at creating websites, they're very good at coding and programming, but then they work with smaller clients like you did, and they want the branding, they want the internet marketing, they want the SEO. And in the beginning, it's hard to say no and go, no, I can't do that, when you feel like you probably can, because you need to justify bringing in the money.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden, a year later, they're thinking, well, we're not actually doing that many websites, which is our strength. And we're spending so much time, doing SEO and internet marketing, where we're decent at it, but that's not what we want to do. And like with you spend 2 years kind of trying to please everyone, where actually, if you just funneled in and said, we're going to be the very best we can at this particular sector,
definitely,
you can usually knock it out of the park. And you might not make the big money in the beginning, but as the weeks and months go by, you become the guy who can make the very best websites for real estate people, or in your case, the people who can do these 360 tours for educational types and for real estate types. And I think that's really well put.
I think that's really well put, Matt. I think that if that'll be the message. I think it was sacrifice in the early years as well, because you're right that if you're fairly competent at doing a number of things but not necessarily excelling at those things, then you can sort of stumble by, as I did, sort of doing a bit of this and a bit of that, using a little bit of savvy just to sort stuff out. But what becomes increasingly difficult is that if you then want to grow that company, so taking the web designer point that you made there, and web design or actual design of online material might be a massive strength of the guys that you mentioned then, but then when it comes to SEO, they're going to be better than I am, or you are at SEO, I guess. Well, I don't know how good you are at SEO, but
not very good.
but you'd hope that they would be, but they're maybe not going to be so good that the leading brands in the country want to use them. They're just sort of all right when it comes to sort of doing that locally, and I think that then you can suddenly become a little bit stuck in a rut and get loads and loads of work and really, really, really busy, but not really able to, and this is a key thing for me, not really be able to delegate any of that work, because everything you get coming to you, it's a one-off, can you do branding? Oh yeah, I could probably figure out how to do branding. I'll figure that out. And then if you've employed a few people, then, and they're not necessarily specialising in branding, and that's the sort of the catch-22, is it's very difficult, depending on the sort of investment, depending on level of investment, I suppose, it's quite difficult to get someone on board who's a specialist at branding and be able to afford to pay those guys before you've actually built up a branding company. So if you're trying to do web design and branding and SEO, then you need specialists really in all those fields to really storm forwards. Otherwise, you'll find that you can't really delegate SEO or branding to someone else, because if they're not specialists, then they're going to be struggling like you. And if they haven't got the incentive of being the founder or a shareholder, or if they're not at that level where they're of seniority where they're able to take on board something and solve problems like you or I maybe can, then those guys, then you're suddenly struggling. You're sort of thinking, well, work's coming back to me after I've sent it to one of our guys and it's just not quite right, and I can't really send that on to the client, so I'm going to have to go and finish it off or whatever, and before you know it, you're chasing your tail. And I think it's a really easy trap to fall into.
It's hard to grow once you get into that aspect.
I think it's just to be disciplined and to really focus and have that belief. And I think I'm not sure if I've done a couple of talks on sort of starting up businesses, and I think judgment is a key element. You've got to use your own judgment. You've got to take on board as many sources of information that you can. So this is a perfect source. The stuff that you're doing is fantastic, and I'll look forward to watching everyone else's videos, because I'm sure I'll pick up loads of business tips.
It's been good.
And I think it's essential. But then I think also it's that using your own judgment and thinking, okay, so this guy said that, Tom said that, Matt said that, but does that apply to me? Are they the same kind of person in business that I would be? Because there's many different ways, I believe, of being a successful person in business, and some ways would definitely not work for me, and maybe my way would definitely not work for other people. So I think it just comes down to individual judgment and what works for that person. So, I think it's almost like the caveat that I always give when I'm chatting to people about businesses. This is sort of how it worked for me, and this is my attitude to risk, and this is how I went forward with it. But you've got to assess your own attitude to risk. So people will be watching this who've set up companies that are, hopefully, well anyway, that are absolutely multi-million-pound screaming companies, and they'll have done it all by taking on investment at the start. They might only have a small amount of equity in their company, or they might have a large amount, but their attitude to risk will be very different to mine, and they'll have made a huge success of what they're doing, I'm sure. But my head doesn't work. So whenever I come up with new ideas for business, I just don't seem to come up with those ideas that require a few million quid's worth or tens of millions of pounds of investment, because my head doesn't quite work like that. My business has been growing organically, and it feels right for me, and it might be a little bit slow and boring for other people who are trailblazers, but it sort of works well for me, and I'm just enjoying growing something that I'm proud of, and I just enjoy working with all the guys there too.
So I speak to a lot of entrepreneurs these days, and I've gone through this myself, where you start off with an idea of what you want to do, and a lot of the time that idea is, I just want to work for myself and not other people, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's where great things often happen. But the sooner you can get to something specific, and you've got a specific audience, you've got a specific product, and you become a master of something, I suppose that's important. And I'm feeling like that's where it turned around for you, where you realise we're doing 360 tours, and we're doing it for these one or two people.
Yeah.
And it might not be the biggest of markets, but we're going to be the best at it, and we're going to get everything out of it. And when you do the numbers, wow, it's not actually that bad.
I think it was passion was probably the big thing for me, and to this day I'm still always trying to I sort of analyse a lot of things and try to figure out whether am I more passionate about interactive media, 360 tours, virtual open days we do for university. I'm really excited about that stuff, and we're doing more and more video stuff at the moment as well. So it's really exciting. Or am I passionate about the business side of things, where I've got a bunch of guys who I respect them all and I love working with them. I turn up in the morning, great people. If I'm lucky, I might have a cup of tea made for me. Probably should make more cups of tea for other people, but just some fantastic people who I share so much time with. And so I suppose maybe I was a bit lucky in sort of the reasons for me wanting to set up a business might have been slightly different to what drives me these days. But I think that there's definitely some kind of commonality along the way. So I genuinely set up a business because I wanted to work for myself. I wanted to be my own boss. I wanted to make my own mistakes, and when I make those mistakes, I want to be able to be in a position where I can work as long as I have to put things right. I never wanted to be in a position where if things went wrong, it would be out of my control. So if I was working for a company and things just weren't quite right, and I thought, I think the company should be doing something slightly different, maybe people might not listen to what I was thinking. The company then hits hard times, I get made redundant, and I'd always be thinking, if only I'd have been given the chance to do what I thought was right, because I think I might have been able to help turn this thing around. And I thought, well, that's maybe the kind of controlling person I am. So if I've got my own business, if something's starting to go wrong, well then it's down to me, and I can take the hit, I can take the sacrifice, I can be the one that, I will be prepared to, and we've, now and again at Revolution Viewing, we're quite careful with our cash flow, but there's been a couple of times where it's been a bit tight. Usually it's tight when we know we've invested loads in people, equipment, and it happened last year, and we were a little bit tight with the cash, and myself and the two co-directors, we just took the hit for the month, so we said, well, we'll just not take a dividend, in the hope that maybe later in the year we can take some payment to sort of cover that quiet month, and we did that, and we would always rather do that than see our employees take a hit, and we think that that's maybe that's sort of part of our long-term attitude at our business, the fact that we would much rather take a hit ourselves than to affect our employees, because we're the guys who, we do benefit obviously financially, and on a number of levels we benefit when the times are good, and I think it's I'd quite like to lead by example and sort of feel that when the times are hard, then I think it's, why should I be benefiting on one hand and then other people be suffering when things aren't as good? I think that I'm the one responsible. So
And I suppose that's largely built around that idea of passion, because it's so much easier to do that when you are passionate about something. If you just get into business because you think it's going to make you a millionaire, it all becomes about money. Whereas if you're truly passionate about what you're doing, the products you're creating, and the people you're working with, you think, well, I can take a month where I'm not getting as much money because I'm loving what I do and I'm loving the vision that we have and where we're going and what we're building. And you know, that's what it's ultimately all about, and all them sort of knocks and bumps along the road, they get you to where you need to go.
Totally right. I set up my business with the plan that in 3 years I'd be a millionaire, and then I would, so in theory by 2007 I'd have been a millionaire in some ways. Sort of my forecasting seemed to suggest that anyway, as I'm sure most people's do when they set up a business. And I don't even think that's such a bad thing. So I've been helping a few people with their forecasting, and I'm loath to sort of say that, are you sure you're realistic with that? You know, I'll give them maybe a little bit of guidance, but I don't really want to dampen the spirit, because I think you've almost got to have that passion to drive. You've got to have that belief that you're going to make it work. And you know what, if you don't hit $1 million in 3 years, but you're doing all right, then is that the end of the world? If you're enjoying what you're doing, I would say, I don't think it is. I think that's quite a good thing. You know, I think it's a positive. So I think that passion, the passion helps promote the drive, and the drive will hopefully promote success, and a little bit of savvy now and again in terms of focusing on the strategy. That can help too. I've got another big mistake that sort of ties in. Do you want to hear it?
Yeah, go for it.
So about 1.5 years ago I set up a recruitment company.
Okay.
And it failed. And it actually, financially it was starting to make a bit of money, but I was getting that feeling that I thought, I'm not enjoying this. I had a guy from our business who was managing that anyway, so it wasn't really something I was having to do day to day, but he'd come to me and he'd say, Tom, we've got this issue. And I'd be like, okay, tell me about it. And in the recruitment world, some of the issues, if there's anyone listening to this, some of the issues can be absolutely hair-tearingly difficult. And I tell you what, I've got huge amount of respect, more so than I ever had done before, for people in that industry, working in that industry. But as an industry as a whole, I think it's a bloody tough industry. Yeah. And I think that there's different parts of the industry that can be really tough and a little bit cutthroat, I think. And then I'm sure other sides of the industry are a little less so, but it's tough.
It comes back to the original issue though, doesn't it? Where, you know, you started off, and I guess this happens to a lot of people, you start off with a broad idea of what you want to do, and you start doing it, and you say yes too much because you always have to say yes and you need to keep the money coming in. But then you get to a point where you're funneled and you think, this is what we're going to do it really well for this kind of person. But then as you grow and grow, more opportunities come away, and you get all these little sort of hints of, oh, we could diversify into this one, or we could set up this and do a sub-brand. And I think it happens to a lot of growing businesses around years 3, 4, 5, where they have them opportunities. And sometimes it's for the right thing. You know, there's nothing wrong with diversification. It can lead to great things. But it comes back to passion. It's got to be for the right reasons. It's got to have that end goal. And if it's taking you away from your overall vision, it's probably going to take you down a bad road.
Yeah, I would say that I was doing that for all the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
To give you a little bit more background, back in 2009 we set up, for the sort of reasons you'd suggested there, Revolution Viewing was going well. We spotted what we felt was an opportunity to set up to create some software that would allow video interviews. So the idea being, as a company we were starting to grow, having to interview more and more people walking into the interview room, and we'd read the CV, but that was about it, maybe a cover letter, and then within a few minutes we just knew that the fit wasn't right, that this person just didn't seem to have the right kind of attitude, didn't seem to, whether it's a body language or they just weren't quite right, and then we'd ask them a few questions and their responses just weren't on the money for us. And so these are things that we could have detected, we felt, over using a video. And so we started to use videos in more of an ad hoc manner and asking people to upload them to YouTube. That was working. So we decided it was time to set up our own video interview software, because speaking to other business associates, they said, yeah, I think that's a problem we have, and I think that we'd be prepared to use that kind of software. That we did a little bit of research, but actually we did a hell of a lot of just like, you know what, this works for us and it feels like it's a good thing, and we'll go for it. And so we did carry out a lot of technical research with companies. What did they actually want what was their biggest fears when it came to software like this? And we spoke to potential candidates, and said, what would your biggest fear be when it came to software? So we addressed those kind of issues when we were developing the software. But what we maybe didn't do is address the sort of the ripe market. So we didn't have people that were begging to pay loads of money for this kind of stuff. We just felt that was a really good idea, and a few people indicated that it might be something they might find useful. So we thought, we'll build it.
Yeah.
And I'm still passionate about that software, and it's doing reasonably well now. We've got a number of graduate scheme programs that run through our software. And that took us a long time to figure out where potentially the money was with that kind of product. And we've got some good competitors out there, some guys who are probably working with a wider market. But we definitely so then we're struggling to monetize that. So 2009 we set it up. 2010 we were marketing it. 2011 we're still marketing it, not making much money with it. Still passionate about the idea. Still running Revolution Viewing. That was bringing in the money, thankfully. And then I thought, well, we should set up a recruitment agency, because these blooming recruiters aren't listening to us. They're not using our software, and they should be. So we'll do it ourselves. So we set up a recruitment agency, and I genuinely still think that there's room for it within the recruitment agency world. Not maybe for every recruiter. It depends on who they're trying to recruit, but it does require a huge shift in pattern of work and culture at the recruitment agency. Suffice to say, when I set up my own, we were using Vortex Vid, the video interview software, and that side of things was working well. But we weren't enjoying the actual recruitment side of it. So we were enjoying our video bit of it, because that's quite fun and quite interesting to to tweak your software. But when it came to a candidate saying, "So have I got the job?" and they're saying, "I think you've got the job," and then they say, the client says, "Oh no, we're not going to bother taking anyone on, or we've changed our mind." And you got to get back to the candidate. The candidate's upset, or quite often we found that candidates would be offered a job, and the candidate goes, "No, I've decided to take a gap year. No, I've decided to do something else." And you're like, oh wow. So you put a lot of work in, and I think that in the recruitment world, you need to put that work in. You need to, like I've said with other business, you got to establish your route to market. Get things running for you, running in the right direction. Then I think that I know there's plenty of money to be made, but that's why we set it up, to make loads of money, and completely the wrong reasons. And because it was for the wrong reasons, I wasn't passionate about it, and because I wasn't passionate about it, I was never going to make any money. And
diversification and just growth in general is always such a tricky one for sort of young and growing businesses, because there are always going to be opportunities. And I suppose one of the biggest skills an entrepreneur can develop is that idea of looking at something and going, yes, no, yes, no, no. And have you kind of developed them skills now, where when you get new ideas and new opportunities come, you've had the things that have worked in the past that haven't, and do you look at things in a certain manner? It's got to tick certain boxes, it's got to play a particular role, otherwise you try and, maybe not now, maybe next year, maybe in a few years' time.
Well, you know what, the mistakes that I've made in the past, so setting up the recruitment agency certainly opened my eyes to it. So it's like everything, you make your mistakes, but I think if you learn from them, which I think I have done, then you're just a little bit more, I wouldn't say, maybe careful, but maybe it just helps to hone your judgment. In terms of whether I've got that nailed now, I would say absolutely not. I think that there's loads of mistakes for me still to make, but I do think that, and I watch guys, people who've been in business for many, many years, and you can just tell that they just know it. So they make calculations and judgment calls within a split second that might take someone like myself a long time to make and figure out and ponder over, whereas they'll have a set plan, they'll have a set vision, they'll know what they're good at, they'll know where their skills lie, they'll know all the businesses that maybe they've already owned.
These people are generally those who have had like 5 failed businesses and they've had to learn a few times to get
possibly,
to that level,
possibly.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully for them they've had a few really successful
ones.
They've
also had to succeed, not just failed businesses,
but
they've generally been there and
failures.
done it, and it takes a little bit of time before you can get to that.
So maybe it takes a few knocks then. So I think when you asked me, can I talk about one of my biggest mistakes? I don't know why. Maybe I blanked it. For some reason, I didn't think about setting up the recruitment agency, which I would actually say, maybe in the earlier part of my business, it was not focusing, and then in the sort of the latter or the last few years, definitely setting up the wrong business for the wrong reasons. And I think it was probably after I'd set up that business, I was reading, or during setting it up, or just after it was conceived, I started to read a book by a guy called Jim Collins. It's called Good to Great. He's got a few different books, but I was reading that one, and it talks about the circles, so 3 different circles, and the idea that if these 3 circles exist, then your business should strive, and actually it's probably a good foundation for setting a business up. Or actually, the way he looked at it was, if you're a huge organisation, then this should drive the vision of your business. So, are you passionate about it? Does it drive your economic engine? As in, I think I interpret that as, can you make enough money to make sure you're satisfied?
Exactly, yeah.
And can you be the best in the world at it?
Yeah.
So it's just 3 things. And I tell you what, those 3 things have completely changed the way that I look at opportunities.
And when you dumb it down, it does do. I mean, is the passion? Are you going to enjoy it? Are you going to wake up every morning excited? Are you good at it?
Yeah.
Can you actually bring value to the market? And is it going to pay enough money for you to pay the mortgage? And it's hard for us to sometimes look at it like that, but it is usually that simple. And if one of those things are missing, you're going to be facing a rather uphill battle. But if those 3 things are there, happy days. Well, before we wrap up on this great interview, if you could offer one piece of advice, and I know you do quite a lot of mentoring, so I'm sure you've come across this a few times, but someone who's looking to start up their first business.
Sure.
Things that we haven't necessarily discussed so far, if it's just one piece of advice which you could offer, what would it be?
Okay, I'd say focus on doing something that you absolutely love, and I think success should follow.
Nice.
Does that work?
I think that works.
Well, I don't know. Those guys can tell you, I suppose.
Well, absolutely.
I hope it does.
There'll be hopefully living comments going, yes.
Yeah. Oh no, you screwed my life. Hopefully not.
But yes, and then they come back a year later and go, actually
no. Yeah. Hopefully not. I
Well,
wish you all the success in the world.
Well, thank you, viewer, for watching. I hope you've taken a lot
cheers.
from Tom. I'm sure you have. He's coming the long way around. He's coming up to a decade of working for himself, but
Jesus.
It's an amazing journey, and I'm sure it's going to be a long
it's been.
one. And you should definitely check out Revolution Viewing because it is very cool. Check it on your iPhone as well.
Cheers, Matt. Yeah, please do.
And indeed, thank you for inviting me into your house.
Thank you very much.
Sharing your thoughts.
Thank you. I've really enjoyed it. Cheers, Paul.
Cheers.